To lunchtime news, and many thanks indeed for keeping me company. As I had mentioned before the break, is that we'll be looking at water and sanitation system, and especially when it comes to urban centers. You bear me witness that the population, and especially in Nairobi, has been on the rise for the last, let's say, 10-15 years. I remember when coming to Nairobi more than 20 years ago, the population was about 3 million. Now it's about 5 million. And of course, the meager resources have to be shared, and especially water. And that is why we'll be keeping tabs with what is happening in water and sanitation system. And now allow me to introduce the Chief Executive Officer of Water and Sanitation for Urban Populations, or WhatsApp. That is Ed Michel. Karibu sana to the program.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me on.
Welcome. Now, first things first, for many Kenyans who do not know exactly what WhatsApp does, what is your mandate here in the country, and how have you been able to manage? You have noticed that we have a serious water shortage in the sub-Saharan Africa, and especially in Nairobi because of the big population.
Yes, I mean, you're absolutely right. The growth of cities is one of the biggest challenges that many countries face, and of course that's exactly the same here in Kenya. I think the data from the United Nations is that if you go back to the turn of the millennium, the number of people living in cities in Africa was 200 million, 210 million. Yep. Today it's 500 million, and in 25 years' time it'll be 1 billion. And if you think, even the best run utility or municipality really struggles to keep up with that level of population growth. We operate across 7 countries, 6 in Africa and 1 in South Asia, and we work with and through municipalities and utilities to help them and enable them serve their citizens, particularly in the low-income communities.
And what are the most urgent challenges facing water and sanitation systems in the country? I do remember when talk about sanitation, something that I had mentioned earlier on when we were off mic, is that we had flying toilets, and especially in the informal sectors. But I think that has been managed effectively, though we really need a lot to do. What exactly do you think are the major challenges that we are facing?
Yes, thank you. I mean, I first visited Kenya as a student nearly 40 years ago now, and the progress is extraordinary. That's the first thing to say. Real progress has been made. But if you look in Kenya and across sub-Saharan Africa, there are still many people without access to sustainable water and sanitation. Something like, more than half. More than 3/4 of the people actually don't have access to really safely managed sanitation. Many more have access to water. But the challenges are both the growth in the population and also climate change, which is making the availability of water so much less. So we do an awful lot of work, first of all, to save water. And that has the dual benefit, so that is working with the utility to stop leaks and also to prevent illegal connections and other sources of losses. And of course that has a dual benefit because it frees up water that is then available to supply into unserved areas, and it also builds the revenue base of the utilities and makes them more financially sustainable.
And I noticed that you have the 2025-2030 strategic plan. How does it gel with our systems, our water and sanitation systems, and especially to better the lives of those people living, and especially in the informal settlements? Allow me to just point out the informal settlements.
Yes, of course, and thank you for mentioning that strategic plan. We had a brilliant launch event yesterday, which was really lovely. It also coincides with water and sanitation for urban populations having existed for 20 years. And over that 20 years globally, we've helped 43 million people, which is a fantastic story for
that's almost the whole population of Kenya.
Well, and 1/4 of those people, nearly 9.9 million, are in Kenya. So we've had a big impact in Kenya alongside the other countries that we work in. It's been a privilege working here. We have a team of incredibly able Kenyans working in Kenya. But the challenges remain, and this plan that we've set out is our ambition for the next 5 years, but very much in partnership with others. This isn't something that we can in any way do alone. The key for us is that any change we make is sustainable and still there in another 25 years' time. And we think of water and sanitation not as coming out of a tap or being about a toilet, but being about the whole system that delivers that service. So it might be about customer service that's particularly appropriate for low-income communities who are maybe paid daily in cash rather than expecting a monthly bill. It's also about the logistics of running a water or a sanitation business. How do you do repairs? How do you make sure you've got the pumps and pipes? Many, many different aspects, which builds the capacity and the sustainability of the service provider, and also helps them engage with local private sector providers. Because if you take toilets in particular, in Kenya, very few people are connected to a sewer. Most people have what we call on-site sanitation. But of course, the front end of that is only one part. If you want safely managed sanitation, you have to have means of collecting the fecal sludge matter, transporting it safely and disposing of it appropriately.
And I've noticed that you have many projects, especially in the East African region. Specifically, I'm mentioning Kenya because I've noticed the population and the scarce resources, bearing in mind there's climate change, the water, even in estates, we are seeing the rationing of water. How are you supporting some of maybe utilities, like even Nairobi Water, in both water and sanitation?
So we are supporting currently 7 utilities across Kenya, but we also work with some of the national level bodies like WASREB, the water regulator. And for instance, because if we work with WASREB, for instance, and support them, that impacts on all 95 utilities that there are across all the counties in Kenya. So, for instance, we helped WASREB focus on low-income communities and have a key performance indicator that they rank all utilities against. It's called KPI 10. And in their annual reports now, all 95 utilities report on how they're doing in reaching their low-income communities. And that, of course, drives amazing performance in terms of a desire to extend services. Sanitation is always a little bit more complicated because there are many different routes to good sanitation. And as I've said, not many parts of Kenya are sewered. So there's a much more diverse economy, if you like, in the sanitation space. But we've been doing some really interesting stuff here on the team in Kenya have. For instance, in some of the low-income communities here in Nairobi, experimenting with something called simplified sewer systems, which are small bore flexible pipes which you can lay. If you think about an informal settlement, most of your viewers will have seen them, the space between the houses and the access is very, very limited. So you can't be digging up all those footpaths and putting in sewers. So we lay flexible pipes that can provide household level sanitation, tip flush toilets, and connect to the bottom end to the existing sewerage system. And that's something that our team have pioneered here in Kenya, and we're sharing those results elsewhere.
And I've noticed that Kenya allocates 0.5 of its GDP to matter sanitation. This is quite little if you compare that we are a country of about 55 million Kenyans. So how do we plug these gaps, and how do you come in as WhatsApp?
Financing water and sanitation is a hot topic everywhere. It is at home in England, where I'm based, and of course here in Kenya. The African Union recently made an estimate that the annual deficit, the annual gap in financing, is of the order of $60 billion US dollars for sub-Saharan Africa, not just for Kenya. And of course, as Kenya, commendably and notably has moved up the development ladder, is no longer a low-income country, sources of overseas development aid reduce. But there's a huge focus on international loans, on what is called blended finance, where you bring together commercial loans with other forms of income that give you an average interest rate that's lower than the commercial loan, and that's a good way of accessing finance. Our focus usually is on the financial sustainability of the utility and what they themselves can do to improve that by getting more customers, by treating those customers well, and therefore by getting more income in, which they can then reinvest in their business. Because domestic finance is increasingly, in a country like Kenya, as important as overseas development aid.
Let's go to a case study. Recently, you helped Nairobi Water establish a low-income unit that serves a number of districts. And how does this model ensure that there is a sustainability for underserved Kenyans, and especially, again, those in the informal sector?
That's a great example, and we supported Nairobi Water by paying for the original 2 staff of that unit. It now has, I'm not sure of the latest figure, but it now has many staff and the same status as any other division within Nairobi Water. And it focuses on how Nairobi Water can serve those low-income communities. So, for instance, as I've mentioned already, the customer service aspects of that, how you can engage with low-income informal communities living in difficult circumstances and bring them in as proper, legitimate customers of the utility. But many other aspects as well about network extensions, improving service to the communities. We've piloted and promoted prepaid water meters, so you have a little fob, you pay up front, you go to the kiosk and you press the fob against the kiosk, it dispenses 20 litres of water.
Yeah.
So you know how much money you have left on your card. It's an easy way of managing your finances if you're living in one of those informal settlements while also having access to good quality water.
And finally, as we wrap up, what's the vision for Kenya's urban wash post 2025? Because you have a 5-year strategic plan. And what lessons can we borrow? Because when preparing this interview, I noted there are some very good lessons from Zambia and Mozambique that we can replicate here for sustainability as we wrap up.
So our vision is the same, I think, as the Kenyan government's vision, which is that all citizens, including those in the low-income communities, should have access to good water and safe sanitation. And the global targets around this, the Sustainable Development Goals, are also targeting that by 2030. We will do whatever we can to support that ambition. We do it through very practical activity on the ground, and because we operate in different countries, as you say, we're able to share experiences and learning that have worked well in one place and bring them into Kenya. But equally, I'm frequently using examples from Kenya with other governments, nationally and internationally, to find ways of solving these very challenging problems.
Yeah, very interesting conversation, especially when it comes to water, where everyone needs the water. And of course, Nairobi residents must be very keen on this interview because they have been experiencing water rationing, and of course, the slums just the populations just keep rising. But thank you so much, Ed Michel, who is the CEO of Water and Sanitation for Urban Population, or WASUP. We are looking at water and sanitation systems, and especially in urban populations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving on, the Kenya